A very good afternoon to all panelists here and the audience present here. Indeed, a great session in store for us now, which is breaking the glass ceiling. And we have four eminent panelists to actually talk on something very relevant and something which they have already overcome, where they've reached a particular level, and we'll talk about how they have reached that level and are there actually challenges to reach the level, and what does it require to actually break the glass ceiling, if we may use a cliched word. Before we start the conversation, what comes to my mind is a book. The book by Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook. The book is Lean In. And in the book, she talks about women breaking the glass ceiling with a very nice metaphor, which says that it's a chicken and egg situation. The chicken is, which says that it's only when women reach leadership positions that the glass ceiling will be broken. The other way around, the egg is, the external barriers should be broken, only then women can reach leadership positions. So it's actually, both the statements are true. And the question is, we hear from them as to actually what is required. Are there certain special facilitating factors which are required to break the glass ceiling? And what is it that drives them? And the reality also is, look at the Fortune 500 companies. We have hardly 5.2% CEOs. Women reach the second position, but they finally hitting the first position often becomes a barrier. There are a lot of barriers, external barriers, which people who've been working, people who've excelled will always come across such barriers, unknown barriers, unwritten barriers. So we hear about them, we hear their stories. And another thing before in my opening remark, which I would like to say, which is very relevant, is something which LinkedIn had done a survey recently, as recent as January 2021, in which they did a survey of more than 10,000 men and women and tried to find out, are there gender biases? And it was found that India, there are, is worst as far as the Asia-Pacific countries are concerned. So definitely there are a lot of barriers, but yet women are coming up. So we need to understand from these eminent panelists who are there, all from different fields who have excelled, who have made a mark for themselves, as to what is it, what are the challenges, what is their journey, and what are the learning lessons that we can all take when we go forward. So with that background setting, we start the conversation. We make it as informal. We'll try to make it as informal as possible. We start by, giving each of the panelists about 6 minutes time each to first talk about your journey. You talk about some of the challenges that you faced, and then we will try to take it more on the interactive mode. Okay, we start with Nelly Ahmed first. Can you just share your journey and also some of the challenges, how you overcame those challenges?
Hello, can I be heard? Yeah, very good afternoon. Thank you, Shriparna, for giving such a lovely introduction, and to Gayatri. It really feels nice to be in a platform where they're all women. I'm not biased, but I feel happy looking at the audience, yes. There had been challenges. I started my journey 35 years back. And I started with one student. But that stage came to a later part of my life. But the first training to become an entrepreneur, I was thinking what to do, where to join in. And I had come back from Calcutta, so I knew Bonnie and Shriparna. So I joined an organization called NICET. At that time, it was NICET, which is now IIE. And I'm very happy and thankful to Shriparna and to Dr. Pranab Sharma, who actually mentored me. And we were a really big group of 25 to 30 ladies. And it was in those days when, probably in the 1980s, late 80s, and we were a group of women who had different passions. I didn't know what to do, absolutely not. And we were told to, okay, let's pack this group and we take them to Delhi. We were taken to Delhi for an educational trip, and I still remember. And we were taken to various factories to actually identify what do you really want to do as an entrepreneur. Till then, I didn't know what. But when we came back after much, thanks to NISIAT at that time, they took us and took very, very good care of us. We came back with very happy memories. And then I was enthused. Now I have to do something. And then the cane and bamboo thing came to my mind. The cane and bamboo started because we have a tea garden and we have a plantation of bet. And that was my also little passion, that why don't I, start up this cane and bamboo unit. And thereafter it was no looking back. So I started. It was doing well. I was selected by NSIC to go to Birmingham for the gift fair. I took my products, all got sold. Then coming back home, I was again selected to be part of the Bhopal all women's delegation, all India, and I was selected to be one of them, sponsored by AFC, Assam Financial Corporation. Again selected by Assam government to be part of a delegation to go to the Southeast Asian countries for transfer of technology, because then I was still into bamboo and cane. And after coming back, another thing, I went to Goa. I took another lot of furniture, which is from the Assam government, DIC, and everything got sold off, and the governor of Goa bought off everything. And I said, no, now I don't need to stay, I'll go back. They said, no, hang on, you have to stay on. So I hung on for the last day, and it was really so encouraging to see that your products are appreciated, not because it is Nelly Ahmed's product, but people, from Assam, the cane is appreciated so much that First Lady, the governor's wife, she said, oh, they're beautiful, and I'm going to just buy all of them, please book it. And that was another happiness factor. Coming back home, then I found that it was getting labor intensive. I couldn't manage. I had friends and family to help me. Come on, we'll procure the cane for you from Silchar. Come on, we'll do this for you. Orders were pouring in. And then I started my school in the meantime. That school also was growing. And when in the growing stage, I weighed both. Do I really want to do this cane and bamboo? Not really, because it was too much getting into the labor intensive unit of getting procurement of material, talking to the laborers, juggling with them for pricing, all of that. I said, no, my school is better off. Then I realized my heart was with the school and with students, and I love children, by the way. I love children. So I think that passion I followed, and my school grew. But when the stage of the journey was not easy, there were many hurdles, there were many obstacles, but I didn't give up. I said, I've got to reach there, and I've got to reach there, no matter what. So when I had to approach the officers in the secretariat for this application and that form and the other thing, and they said, no, Baido, bohibo lagibo. Bohim. Apni kiman deri bohibo. Muglu jiman deri sir nahe. So I sat. But to my luck, it happened very fast that he approached, and then we got talking, and my job was done. So you see, never give up, and I never gave up. My focus was very clear, that if I start the school, which was, again, family and friends helped me, and they said, come on, Nelly, you just started off. You've got the right qualifications. I was trained in the Montessori way, and I went around the schools. I didn't find what I thought should be a proper school. And my mother at that time, she encouraged us three sisters that knowledge is power. Stick to it. Because she was one of the first few batches of Lady King College then in the 1950s. And she encouraged all we three sisters, come on. And I have 8 brothers. So, she encouraged that be at par with them. She was a true feminist, and she was married to a tea planter. And she thought, well, this is not my cup of tea, and this is not what I wanted. But anyhow, she survived through that planter's lifestyle, but she wanted us to get out of that and be educated and do something for your own self. And that's how probably the seeds of thought began. And I thought, yes, why not? So I stuck to my school, and that was giving me so much of satisfaction that it pursued from one class to the other and one class to the other. And in between, I was on rented houses, and our parents were not taking them. I said, look, I can't go beyond class 2, 3. And I had most of my friends there, and in fact, I just attended his wedding a couple of days back. And she said, Nelly, you put something chatai on the veranda, please make a classroom there. You know, it was like that. It was just growing and growing. And to my happiness, yes, we grew. And now then we got the affiliation, which was very, very tough. Again, that was another big hurdle, but never give up. Keep your focus ready. Say that, yes, I can do it and I will do it, which I believe in these words over here. And therefore, the affiliation came through with a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of sweat, but the reward was very exciting, because after we were affiliated, then there was no looking back. And that's how the school grew, and that's how today we are a strength of 3,000 plus children, and I could employ 400 plus people, and where I am so proud that I am giving a neat income to these families who are burning the households, their flames for their own living, and I'm sustaining that for the last 35 years. And not only that, today my teachers, my people in the school, my housemates, they all have been there in the school for the last 15 years, 20 years, 22 years. And I tell them to be retire koribo hoise, tumi jua na jao baidok ma school khon na thakile ma mori jam. You know, that's the loyalty that you have to create amongst your organization, thinking that the school is not mine. I would like to say the school belongs to the society, and my duty as a human being, as a woman, I'd like to give back to society by empowering many other along the way. And believe me, my teachers have grown. They are running households, yes, but they have grown with various facilities, various exposure that the school provides. And I think the journey has been tough, no doubt. It's not an easy, it wasn't cakewalk, not at all. But you know, one has to go through it. Nothing is easy, nothing comes on a platter. And the more challenges you take, the better it is. And I think this COVID time also turned around a lot of opportunities. I would come to that to say, you can turn around any challenge into an opportunity. And these are some of the ways that I could find that not only me, I gave it to my teachers, I gave it to the children. They were not used to the Zoom classes. They got used to that, they excelled in that. Teachers were handling 100 children, 50 children at one go through the Zoom classes. But that is just a way to say the challenges were there, but they met them, they went through them. So that doesn't mean we stop by and say, oh, we cannot fold our hands and say, nobody will help you. You got to proceed, you got to give the right foot forward and be confident and be focused. And I thought I was very focused. I wanted what I wanted. And another thing was behind my mind, that why do children go out of the state to study in Mayo? And well, my daughter went to Pathways. But you know, that was behind my mind. Why do they go abroad, or why do they go out of the state? Why can't the state provide them good schools? And that was one factor which kept driving me on to get better education facility in the state. I'm very happy to conclude that I could give so much of employment. So much of employment is generated. I've been helping the society. And not only that, we have an inclusive school since 1988. And these are children who came to us as mute, not mental retardation, physical disabilities. And we've been having the inclusive school right from day one. We started with Kaveri, who was deaf and dumb, and today she's married and a child is in my school. So it's such a happy feeling that you're serving the society, you're getting the good feedback from all of them. And besides that, today Government of India says that all schools must be inclusive. Well, we started years back. Did you look at us at that time? But yes, I think every school needs to empower the teachers to be special educators and help these kind of children as well. So here's my journey so far, and thank you for listening.
Wonderful, Nelly. It was really, I know I've seen your journey, as you have very correctly said that where you started your journey with NISIET, And I was, as you mentioned about that, I was going back way to 1989, 1990, right? When I had also joined. In fact, that was the first class I had ever taken, when you all had joined that program. And I still remember that how do I go and address? So how do I go and address them? You know, that was a thing, fear which I had, that how do I go and address 22 of the students, and how do I, you know, take a class there? In fact, that was the first class I had taken when you all had joined. So it was really way back. And I still remember when, you know, we used to go by that Nisiat bus, remember, from that, you know, Uzan Bazaar area. So with time, I have seen Nelly the way she has emerged. I still remember when she had bought a Fiat, remember? And then now if you say that, you know, where she's reached. So through her journey, what we learn is three things. One is focus, right, which she kept on emphasizing, and never give up. I think these are the two things which have come up very, very clearly. Anywhere, any career that we want to take up, we want to excel, I think these are the two basic issues. And something sometimes gets implanted in our head, as her mother was a big influencer, which came out very clearly. Sometimes it is a positive influence which impacts us. Sometimes it is also negativity which influences us, because there's so much of negativity, so you start, you know, really thinking that I need to do something with life. So it's not always that good things are there, that's why I become successful. Sometimes it is all bad things happening to me. Because of bad things happening to me, I emerge as a leader. So there are two sides to that also. Thank you so much, Nelly. We'll come back to you again.
Thank you.
I next move on to Dr. Kasturi Bhattacharjee. I think you would like to give a presentation, right? So again, I would request you to speak about 6-7 minutes, whatever you want. Maybe by 7 minutes we close. You start with your journey and the challenges which you faced and how you overcame. Yeah, is it showing? Yeah, you want to read it? Yeah, what to do? It's playing from here.
Very good afternoon to all of you. So at the outset, I would like to thank Madam Dibanita Jaiswal for inviting me to this forum, Dr. Suparna and all my panelists here and all the members present today. And it's a great opportunity to be in a wonderful day with the wonderful ladies. So let me start with the statistics. We all know that the Indian population is more than 136 crores. But when you look to the female is to male ratio, it is 0.95 is to 1, which I can say it is approximately 1.1. But if you look to the pyramidal organization structure, what do you see? It is a man graduate who enters the glass house and then breaks the glass ceiling. Whereas on the other hand, a female with same amount of education, with same amount of caliber, you see she is being stuck at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And it is very hard for a female to shatter a glass ceiling or to break a glass ceiling and to enter into the leadership position. So ladies and gentlemen, don't you think that there is some equalities between the male and the female? And people are expecting that a female with same caliber gets stuck to the bottom of this economic pyramid. However, those women, like I can see all these wonderful women out here who could break the glass ceiling and enter into the leadership position, had to face a dual difficulty. First, if they're warm, if they have a caring manner, they're considered not as a leader. They are perceived not to be a leader. In the other hand, if we try to be tough, if we try to be logical, if we try to be strong, what do they say? It's so difficult to work with this woman. So that is the twist and that is the complexity. But what I believe is that a strong woman, as Mrs. Das has already mentioned, she's both soft and powerful, she's beautiful, she's both practical and spiritual. She loves, she forgives, and she perseveres. No matter what life throws at her, she always believes in herself. And that is what I like to mention, that we should believe in ourselves. Our competition is with ourselves. So let me start, as Suparna Madam has already asked me to start with the journey, let me start with my journey. I come from a very humble family, not essentially a matriarch, but basically with a very strong female woman figurehead. My mother, like she was the main person who was to take decision in my family. And my father who used to love us, I'm the youngest of all the three daughters, used to love us and encourage us so much and doted us exactly like how he doted his son. And I'm so blessed to be married to a family like who is so simple, so progressive, and both my in-laws and my husband always believes that there is no difference between a man and a woman. So let me go back to 2 decades back. 2 decades back, just after my MBBS, I got married, and I went and when I entered into residency program, that is in the same year of my marriage, I delivered my first baby. And when I was in the year of my residency program, I delivered my second baby. So when with all the studies and with having both small children, I was wondering, what do I do? Should I leave everything and be a happy mother? Or should I continue with the career? Then what I realized that the motherhood is a journey. It is not a destination. So I decided that let me take this journey as a challenge to accomplish both my career and also to raise my daughter. And thus I went for my first fellowship. My first fellowship when my younger daughter was only 3 months. She was not even having the neck following, and my second daughter only 2 years. So now I have decided, yes, I need my career to go on, and also I need to be a mother. In the previous session, there was someone asking like about the domestic role. I still believe that even a male child, his first word is ma. So we need to be a ma, whether it's a male, it's a female. And this male child, when he grows up, he is the person who will work for the woman empowerment, and he'll consider female to be equal to that of the man. So after finishing this fellowship, I have finished this fellowship much ahead. I completed in 6 months. Then I came back and joined Sri Shankadam Netralaya as a junior consultant. And this, I think many of you must have visited. Sri Shankadam Netralaya, which is considered as a state-of-the-art eye hospital offering eye care services to the people of Assam, to the people of Northeast. And it has been dedicated to the nation by the then Prime Minister, visited by multiple dignitaries both nationally and internationally, and declared as a center of excellence in the year 2004. So joining this institute, I was very much involved in all the academics, having training nationally and internationally, attending conferences nationally and internationally, arranging conferences, and above all, taking part in many awareness programs. But what I believe that along with all these activities, along with being a good mother, a good consultant, you need to continue with the studies. And I'm really happy to share that I am the first female eye specialist of Assam to have a dual degree, a dual post-graduation in ophthalmology, one from the Guwahati Medical College and other from the National Board of Examination, New Delhi. So one thing at that time, what struck to me is that many of my friends used to go to UK, and then they have realized that the Indian degrees over the last 30 years is no longer accepted by the British Medical Council. And Indians need to pass a licensing examination to work in UK. At the same time, the second thought that we are so proud of Sushruta, who is considered as a father of medicine, and we are all like still like his legacy is carried on. So what is this so special about this international examination? So this is a curiosity in my mind that having my training in India, having teaching in India, which we consider to the most comprehensive, to be the best in the world, but why this Indian degree is not accepted by the British Medical Council? And if you want to appear in that examination, you need to go to UK, you need to work 3 to 5 years in UK only to be eligible to sit for the examination. So I wrote that, and I wanted that with this training in India, I wanted to appear for the examination there in UK, and all alone, like even my family members were shocked that why do you want to take this examination, like you're not even being trained in India, trained in UK. So, and in spite of all these obstacles, I decided that yes, I should go to UK, I should appear for the examination, and I'm very happy to share that I passed the examination in the first attempt and became the first lady eye doctor of Assam to have a FRCS in ophthalmology. And interestingly, after 2 years, I became the global examiner of FRCS, and now I can go to these international countries. I get a chance to assess the training and teaching of those international students. And likewise, something very interesting I want to tell you, like when I passed this examination, at that time the trend was that you need to work in UK for 3 to 5 years, then you can sit for the examination, otherwise you are not going to pass. So when I passed the examination and the professor told me, yes, you have passed, and he asked me, the doc, for how long you have been working in UK? Then I told, sir, this is my first visit to UK. I have no training and teaching in UK. I just had all my training in my own mother India, and I have come for the examination. So he was so happy happy, and immediately he has offered me a job. And you know, at that time, I found that this is the highest achievement. I got a job in UK, and in Shankardev Nethralaya, when I was working there, we are not allowed any private practice, so my salary was approximately 26 to 28,000 per month. In the other hand, at that time, that is in 2003, they offered me a package of 28 lakhs per annum. So I was thinking, oh my God, this is something which, like at that age, I was so young. But then I realized that I have not come here to take a job. My curiosity, I have come here for curiosity. But still, I called up my husband and these two role models, my husband and my mommy. What they said, you know, Ma, you take the next flight and come to India and work for the people of Assam. And believe me, my flight was after 3 days. I somehow preponed my flight, and this is something very interesting story. Hope I get a chance to share with you all someday. I preponed the flight and took the flight to India and came back to work for the people of Assam. And now, interesting and icing to the cake is in 2019, I got a second FRCS, and see now I'm putting a star because now I'm not the only female but only doctor of Assam and Northeast to have a double FRCS in ophthalmology. But to climb up the, I'll just finish it very soon, but to climb up the ladder further and to break this glass ceiling, I realized that you need to go along the path of academia, research, and the community. You have to work for the community. You need to reach the community. So I had done multiple researches, basically on eye cancer, basically on the facial anatomy, delivered multiple lectures here and there, but the most important, which I'm very happy to share with you all, that this year I have been elected as a member editorial board of very prestigious American Academy of Ophthalmology and Magazine, and also the member national advisory board of the International Journal of Ophthalmology. But being a surgeon, I'm very passionate to go ahead with my surgery, and I have conducted more than 33,000 eye surgery. But what I believe is that along with the surgery, you should go ahead with the research. You should go ahead with all the activities, and we are the first one in India to start a very novel surgery, and this surgery, which is basically being done for those people like falling trauma, they have total loss of vision. So we did the research, we conducted the research, and now we can regain the vision of those small children, especially the road traffic accident. And this is for the first time being done in Guwahati. We get the referral here from all over India, whether it's Delhi, Ahmedabad, Baroda, and also we get international referral even from places like Sydney for this type of surgery. And with so much of controversy, with so much obstacle, like all the institutions were asking, like, what is this that you're doing? But now people, after they have started inviting me for the lectures nationally, internationally, and they have accepted it. And this became the first surgery in India to be conducted, and also we have received the best paper. As I have already mentioned, my passion is to reach the unreached, to work for the community. So I have been very fortunate to work with Sri Shankardev Nethralaya and get an opportunity to work for the ICAM, to go to the villages and see how our brothers and sisters are actually suffering in the villages, which is the responsibility of every doctor to do so. And today I'm happy to share with you that this institution could be able to eradicate avoidable blindness in 200 villages of Assam, and this is something first time being done in the whole of the Northeast. And we have been providing free services to these villages of Assam and Northeast worth approximately more than 48.57 crores. So this is what I like to share, and besides all the awards that have been mentioned earlier, one which is very hard to me and very prestigious for all the eye doctor is the Rangachari Award. And again, you can see a single star here because I'm the first and only doctor, not a female doctor, to receive this award. And lastly, I like to mention, now this is the time which you say why Madam has asked me to speak on breaking the glass ceiling. And this is what I believe that it was September 2019, where there was an interview both from within the state and outside the state to appear for the interview for the directorship. So I was thinking whether I should appear or not, and I was the only female. But anyway, I went through, I cleared the FRCS, I cleared this interview, and I got selected as a director. But when I got selected as a director, like I was very happy. Okay, I'm the female, and now I need to manage this whole, because we have got three pillars in the institution. One is the clinics, one is academics, and one is the outreach community. And we have this three big group of institution with more than 10 to 11 centers. So to manage this group of institution, I was still skeptical because all these years I've been a hardcore clinician, a hardcore academician, researchers. So how do I manage? But I feel that learning doesn't stop at any age. Age is never a bar for learning. So I applied for management courses, and I'm very happy to share with you all, especially the young generation, because I'm so aged as compared to you all, that I applied for management program in multiple centers, but what I selected is that I got myself enrolled in the Leadership in Medicine, which is a postgraduate management program by Harvard University. And I'm doing this the whole day. I work in the hospital and night. Actually, it's an offline course, but now because of COVID, it's become online. I need to go and appear for my examination. And now what I believe that I need to be committed to the quality improvement, for the patient safety improvement. And last week, Sri Shankaram Netrala has received the highest accreditation for the quality, that is a NABH accreditation. And with this, I believe that now, since I could enter the leadership position, what I need to do, I need to follow a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Like, I think you'll know how Toyota company is today one of the biggest company. Why? Because the leaders believe in go to Gemba. Means you need to go to the front line. You need to get the feedback from the front line. It is the front line people who are actually helping us in every aspect in the process of development. So as a top-down, as a visionary, to work for the vision and mission of the institution, to help in the resources, I also follow bottom-up approach, and with following the 6 main directives of quality, being patient-centric, and also developing a just culture. Apart from this, very much involved into sports and other cultural activity. But before I end, I'd like to thank my husband, Dr. Harsha Bhattacharya, and my two daughters, Shubarna and Pragya. Pragya was so small when I went for my fellowship, and today she is a doctor. She was only 3 months when I went for fellowship, because this family of mine has helped me cross the leadership chasm. So with this, I would like to conclude that now, since I am in the leadership position, I would like to empower more women. I would like to amplify the women's voices, be with the women, and definitely help more women to come to the national and international forum. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much, Kasturi. It was a pleasure listening to you. I'm sure it must have been a very, very enthralling session for all the young minds which are here. But that nothing is impossible. I think that comes out very, very clearly from what you have achieved. And truly, we're breaking the glass ceiling. You know, you've actually broken the glass ceiling, climbed the ladders, and reached a pinnacle. And I'm sure there's much more to go. And as we take on the interactive session, I'm sure there would be a lot of questions as to how you could manage so much, how you could stretch yourself. Thank you so much. So we'll hear from, we'll have an interactive session once all the speakers are over. But I'm sure you can just keep on thinking as to what you want to ask all the panelists here, because everyone in their own domains have actually excelled. They've gone through a particular process, they've achieved, and that achievement is through a lot of struggle, a lot of hurdles which they had to overcome. So we think the young minds can start thinking as to what you want to learn from the panelists who are here with us. Thank you so much once again. Can I ask now Indu Singh, because we had a doctor, now can we go to an entrepreneur, right? We have a diversity even here as an entrepreneur. Again, I would request you to speak on more about your journey and the challenges that you faced, because we know women in entrepreneurship, while we have academics, etc., but in entrepreneurship, it's a difficult journey. And we have, all India statistics would say we have hardly 19% of the total are women entrepreneurs. And we have very few women entrepreneurs who have scaled and actually reached a particular level, who've accelerated. So we would like to hear from you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I'm audible. So thank you so much, Dipanita ma'am, Sriparna ma'am, been meeting you always, and it's a pleasure to be on the dais with such wonderful women. I've been hearing, and it's when I'm awestruck with what I've been hearing today. And for me, again, to start my journey, I grew up in a small oil township, Duliajan, and my parents both working. So one thing was that broadened my horizon since my childhood, because my mother was working before I was born. Like, so I was born to a working mother, to have a wider perspective about equality, gender equality at those days. So growing up in Duliajan and then completing my graduation in Guwahati and post-graduation from Punjab Agriculture University, while I was doing my PhD, I was doing my FL, my PhD in between with papers, invitation from Washington DC to pursue my research. I get married. And because my father was retiring, and so there was this wish, because a small humble family. So I agreed, and I thought I would, because it's research and I was already completing my MPhil, and I said, why not continue with my PhD even after I get married. So after I got married, things changed, and it wasn't, I won't say it was bad. I somehow wanted to enjoy being married also. I wanted to be in that frame because I grew up in a nuclear family, and I come married to a extended family, and I was enjoying it. But somewhere I was thinking, let me finish this path of being a mother, which I was looking forward to throughout my life. I wanted to be a mother, and I get my daughter. My daughter was born to me in a years of my marriage, and I thought, why not let me take a break of 2-3 years, and I'll pursue with my research again, since I had the opportunities open to me. Once I get my son, my second child, after 3 years of my marriage, 3.5 years of my first child, and then when I wanted to go back once again to start my research, I understand that the universities, 2 universities in my periphery, in Tinsukia and Guwahati, did not have the subject in which I had MPhil from Punjab Agriculture University. So the option, then I write back to my university, they say, come back. Come back, you can come here anytime and start your thing. But then I was married to a bureaucrat, and leaving 2 children behind, going back to Punjab Agriculture University at Ludhiana, it didn't seem possible to me at that time. That was not the time with emails and mobile phones, so being cut off from my children and be there or taking my children along wasn't working with me. So with that kind of a beginning, somewhere I started working for a corporate world as a corporate trainer for around 8-9 years. And plus thing was that being married to a bureaucrat, I got an opportunity to see what was happening to the women, and if I was a qualified woman or if I was academically qualified and sitting at home, what could I do if I'm not doing a full-time job or if I'm not being full-time working? What could I do to be myself, like, at least have my dreams fulfilled and not sit at home? So that is when I was thankfully into too much of reading because research and all was there in my life. So I continued reading books and passing whichever exams were available nearby. I completed my B.Ed then from Dibrugarh University, sitting at home. Any exam which was, even if there was this NIIT coming, so I would go and do my computer course and try to understand what new is happening in this world. So all that was happening, and there was a joke in my extended family that jo bhi exam, whichever yate porikha hobo pare, she will be appearing for all of those sitting at home. So thankfully that helped in future, and I got a job with the corporate world sitting at home. That was, I'd say in pride that, the corporate bosses, the zonal head comes to my house to offer me the job, and I take a job with Tata AIG Life Insurance Company as a corporate trainer for Upper Assam. Then during that time, one thing I was that, I was always very curious about what happens to those women, those who are wives or daughters or, connected to famous people and yet they're qualified and sitting at home. What could they be doing? So I would be reading a lot of biographies and women, centric books like, till now, like reading about Malala or Michelle Obama now and Hillary Clinton. So I would be reading anybody from any part of the world. So be reading those books and trying to understand how they would be functioning. So in 2005 and 6, I happened to meet Fabric Plus Private Limited director, who's last year we lost him, Dilip Barua, and because my husband was at that time the managing director for AIDC. So I met those people and tried to understand how things work. It was very interesting to be a part in this part of the country, Northeast India, where women were empowered without the knowledge. That is when I went up to the villages and see, we say there is no Dahej in this part, but it was so interesting that every Assamese woman, when she is married, the family gives her a loom. I don't know if many people know it. You go to any village home, there is a loom on the top of the kitchen thing. It is hung there so that it doesn't rot with the fumes of the whatever wood fire. It stays good, in good health. And that is where, then I understood that this is where empowerment started, that they let their daughter get a loom. While she was getting married, she got a loom along with the kitchen stuff and everything, which means that she could live a life, she could weave herself some clothes and also be an entrepreneur on her own if she wanted to. So that was an empowerment in northeastern India, which I don't know if it is there in any part of the country. So this was there, and it struck me, and then when I met Dilip Bura, he said, it's a crime for you to be sitting at home. Come on, let's go. And I started visiting the villages, visiting women, those who were weaving from doing into handloom, handicraft, water hyacinth, and all. In 2006-07, I started this journey, and with Northeast Women Entrepreneurs Association, where I was associated as a member ever since I think I got married. In 95-96, I met Deepa Barua, who was then the president for Tinsukia chapter, Northeast Women Entrepreneurs, and they inspired me to come to their meetings and meet women and understand how handloom was functioning. That is when, through statistics, I understood that in India today, when 76 to 78 weavers are women, 76 to 78% weavers, when we say weaving unit, are women. In northeastern India, 49% of the weavers are women. So which is 79% in the total country of the men. Out of that 50, so you can say around 90% of the weavers in northeastern part of this country are women. Then I tried to meet them and try to motivate them to come up and start entrepreneurial things with Northeast Women Entrepreneurs and the government schemes and all. So one thing which I understood was, when we talk about, just now T. Vedas ma'am had spoken about feminism and a difference between International Women's Day and activism. So in that part, let us understand one very simple thing. When we say poverty, at that stage we don't understand activism till the time we are not empowered. We need to be empowered to be understanding empowerment. We need to be rich, economically, financially independent, which is a very far journey for now when we see to the mass women which we meet in this country. So we might be, I don't know how many percentage of the women, those who would be actually sitting and understanding this, but the reality, which is from Guwahati, I would say Chaigaon is a village which is 50 kilometers away. I happen to be working with women weavers there, below poverty line, working only for 50 or 100 rupees wage for one gamusa to be woven. So we are 50 kilometers away from reality. That's where I feel, that is where we stand as women empowerment is concerned. So financial independence we haven't seen in reality in our country, in our part of this world. Then one thing, when I understood that when we say we have schemes, there are 101 schemes today for SC, ST women, OBC women, below poverty line. But are we reaching to them? Are these women being able to reach up to? No, they cannot. They don't like coming to the secretariat. As Really Ahmed said, for us it is difficult to be getting our papers done. To imagine what would be their process to be reaching to those places. So I took it up when I took it as a General Secretary 3-4 years back for Northeast Women Entrepreneurs, that I need to reach up, their message needs to reach up to the authorities. And when I reached up to them, surprisingly, to all the government organizations, be it in industries or commerce, AIDC, NSIC, DIC, IIE, I understood that everyone was looking for these people. Please come, we want to help. We are not having our targets done. So now this is the journey which continues with me. And one thing which I would want to say to everyone, that let's somehow try and reach to them. Let that also be that this time last year, there was the theme for International Women's Day was, the awareness of women rights. That was 2020. This time it is choose to oppose. That's how it is this time, 2021. So I would say merge of both, because 2020 went with COVID. So let's spread the awareness that women activism, women feminism, all together, the reality is we need to get them economically independent first, then education, yes, and then we understand empowerment. Because otherwise, if we are leaving back, like Swami Vivekananda said, Malala said, Michelle Obama, you can quote many women, those who said when 50% of our, the population is women, we cannot be developed till the time we have to take them along with us. We are not competing with anybody. We are not competing with men. We are women biologically. We are different from them. We are better or worse, I would not say, but we are different. We have our own niche. We are not competing. We are not fighting for equality with men. We have our own niche. Let's understand that. Let's be aware of it, and let's go ahead, be empowered, and make our own way to empowerment. That's where I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Indu Singh. A different story. I think this is a story I'm sure a lot of us here could relate with, because as women, it's a very difficult decision. The ecosystem actually has to support us to continuously keep on working and take up leadership roles. And here her story depicts that, she had challenges, she had a lot of things, desires to do, she never gave up. Maybe she looked out for a different opportunity, again found that in that opportunity she could capitalize, and she found satisfaction in doing something which is, we can call her as a social entrepreneur, where she's trying to help out to the weavers, reaching out to the weavers. So the lesson possibly we learn from her is that, it's not necessary that, if the situation or the environment is such that at a point of time I need to take a little break, doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be end there. So we always come up, and I've seen through interactions, particularly with women entrepreneurs, we find two categories of women entrepreneurs. One in the age of maybe 18 to 25 when they are very active, then another age is after 40. When they are little responsibilities are over, then, entrepreneurship is an area which is very, very flexible. You can always think about starting business at any age. Age is never a deterrent, and it's always a number. So I'm sure it's going to be a confidence booster that you can look at starting a career at any point of time. So breaking the glass ceiling doesn't necessarily mean that you have to continuously keep on working. There could be breaks in between, but coming back is more important. That's the lesson I think we take from her story. Right? So thank you once again. And now we come to the last panelist, Santana Sharma, Dr. Santana Sharma. The same thing, you speak for about 6-7 minutes about your journey and the challenges that you faced.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled and honored to be in the midst of this wonderful woman. Every woman has her story, and I have mine too. Basically, what I feel is that my concept of success is not just breaking barriers or pushing boundaries, but you need to have a sense of personal fulfillment in what you do. And since my early childhood, all I wanted to be was a doctor, a physician. And believe me, there was no clear-cut recipe to this. It was not a journey which was very easy. And of course, academics was not very challenging for me. I was a very hardworking student. And after securing a state rank in my 10th exam, there were so many expectations from me, from my family, teachers, and everyone was thinking that I'd do very well, and go abroad and take up a job where, you have a lot of financial as well as, hold good position. But then I wanted to be a humble physician, and so I chose medicine. And again, there were challenges when I took up the specialty after I did my graduation. During that time, it was around 21 years back, when there were very few doctors who chose medicine or critical care as a specialty. It was like more of there were huge number of lady doctors who were into gynecology, obstetrics, pediatrics, or preclinical subjects, and very few surgeons. I believe Dr. Kasturi was versed with that situation. Very few surgeons and very few physicians who would take up such a challenging career. And there were people who said that, will you be able to build a practice when there are so many competitive male physicians counterparts? I said, let's take up the challenge. So I took up medicine as a specialty. After my post-graduation, I went to UK and I cleared my license to practice exam. During that time, I was carrying my second daughter. I was already married and I had a daughter whom I had left behind with my mother and husband, and I had gone there. And then I cleared my license exam very well, and I was offered a job as a specialist registrar. I worked there. I worked in UK for a couple of years, and then after that again, as would have it, I wanted to come back to my family, my parents, and my family was telling that you come back to your people. Why don't you serve your people? So I came back, and then we thought that why not have a quality, give a quality care which was at par with the Western countries. And it was during that time that I had briefly worked, in downtown hospitals and Hayat Hospital as a critical care physician. And then me and my husband, who is also a surgeon and a trauma specialist, we thought of, we had contemplated of a hospital which would, cater to the critical care and emergency needs of the people of this region. And we came up with this concept along with a few other like-minded doctors, the concept of Health City Hospital. And we invested in it, and we came up with this hospital. And as you can see that, we are still in the process of, catering to the people who are in, really help of need emergency care and critical care. And of course, there were a lot of challenges like all other, people. And the most important challenge is in the medical field is not a gender bias, mind you. I'm telling you this because you can see that in the health industry or in healthcare, there is an equal representation of females as well as males. Almost 51% of, graduates, medical graduates are females. But what happens that as you go up in the ladder in the career, most of these female graduates, they do not continue with their career, or they stick to some a career which demands less of them. And emergency medicine, critical care is very challenging, very demanding. You have long shifts, very exhausting and daunting, hours. But at the same time, you need to keep that emotional contact with your patients. Most of these patients are seriously ill. Most of them are on a ventilator, on life support. And then you have to, think about how to keep them alive and how to take them out of this critical situation. And then the attendants come up and tell you after, you have explained to them the situation, "Baido sarok ketia log pam?" So it was at that time when you felt that, what is this? Like, is this gender bias still there, present? But now over the years, I felt that during my last 20 years of practice, this is gone. And most of the critical care units across the country are now run by female intensivists. You'll see that most of them are ICUs are run by female intensivists. And it's such a welcome, thing. A CTVS surgeon, most of the CTVS are, you'll hardly find a female cardiothoracic surgeon or a female neurosurgeon. And most of them, they do their surgery, and once the case gets complicated, the case is, sent to the ICU. And then they call up and ask you, what is your input regarding this case? It feels so great. It feels really great that you are being able to do something for a sick patient. So this is something which is, you feel humiliated, and at the same time, over the years now, you feel pride in your profession. And this is one thing which keeps you strong, and this is what I believe. And another important thing which I'd like to, emphasize here is that in the healthcare industry, you'll feel that all the time there has been a social biasness that females are given a cure role, and the males are into females are in the care role and males are in the cure role. Care role in the sense that you'll see that most of the nurses, the midwives, or the first-line, front-line health workers are females, while the surgeons and the management, the ones who are taking care of the hospitals, they are male-dominated. So in that sense, women empowerment is really essential, because you need to see more women leaders in healthcare sector, and you need leaders in every sector of healthcare industry. It is only then we can have an all-round empowerment. Empowerment is not just financial or political empowerment. The most important empowerment is healthcare. We have every minute, every day, we have one woman dying due to either pregnancy-related or childcare issues. And unless and until we empower these women to have right to healthcare, we can do nothing about it. So birth control measures, safe childhood, safe motherhood, these are issues which we should, as women, we should lay stress upon. This is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandana Sharma. Very relevant points that you've raised. I think that's the point, those are the points on which we take the discussion forward. In fact, these are some of the issues I thought of flagging to the panelists, and I'm sure others would also like to ask. And one of the points that you raised was, women often compromise, and they say that, can I take something which is not very taxing so that I can manage everything well? Often not because she wants to do it, but possibly because the environment is such, she makes it, she has to multitask. That's the reason. And then she eventually becomes habituated to that we've seen in every profession. And any woman who tries to go overboard is often clubbed as she's too ambitious. That's the other definition which often comes in. And in leadership roles, I think someone was mentioning, T.Y. Das was also mentioning about, how you are sort of stereotyped that, difficult to work with if you try to be too bossy. So these are issues very easily sort of marked with women. So on that, I would ask any one of you to react. How do you, what is your advice? Like, you do compromise sometimes because of the family issues and others. So should women then, women are often taken less seriously because of that. What do you have to say on that? Any one of you could react. And what should women do, actually, according to you? Because you've already crossed a particular level.
Before I start, I would like to just mention that in the audience, we have a very strong woman with us today. She is Professor Mehta. She is a professor of gynecology from the Apex Institute, the PGI Chandigarh. Madam, we are so happy that you are with us today. And another woman doctor, she is the professor and head of nephrology department, Dr. Manjuri Sharma. So once we discuss about the healthcare, we can also involve you all in the discussion. So pleasure having you on. So, Madam Junto Kotha koise, what are the challenges? I always believe that we need to believe in ourselves. And second kotha, I always feel that my competitor is not a male. My competitor is myself. What I am today, I should be better tomorrow. So we female, I mean, hodai nijoke assess koribo lage. What I have done today, have I done something good for myself and something for the community? And what can I do it tomorrow? Moi bhabu, this is a very important challenge, and this is something which every female should work on it. Our second kotha moko, any female who happens to be very brave, very gorgeous, they need to prove. You are testing every steps of life, yes. They are being tested. But this is so simple for a man. If the man, he climbs up and goes to a leadership position, it is accepted well by the society. But when a female goes, and especially when she happens to be young, she happens to be brave and bold, every moment, every step of test. So that is my question to all of you. Why are females being tested in every steps of the life? So this is what the society needs to change. We believe that change is evolution, right? And we females are the instruments of the change, but it's the responsibility of the society. We always say that behind every man there's a woman, and I believe that behind every woman is another woman. So if the women support each other, today I think we'll be able to break the glass ceiling and come to a better position. I mean, bohote dekhi suje women, yes, aji woman iman empowered ase. Kine code empowerment is in a low level. Chandanai Jindu kose healthcare sector to so most of the lower, I mean, people are nurses or hog or healthcare assistant. This is a female, but kiman manu, there are very few females who could really cross this barrier. Yes, day before yesterday, moi eta ko besi TV nasan kinu TV eta heri eta sai asilu discussion. Guwahati University, 83 or 84% of the students are females. But till date, Guwahati University Vice Chancellor ajilake female nai.
One.
So this is something so important. So we need to support each other. We need to take this opportunity. There's no difference between obstacles and opportunities. So speaker ko say, we need to support each other and we should encourage every female. Ami jodi holistically we all become like one, and I'm sure we'll be able to cross any of the barriers.
আৰু এইটো আই থিংক এই বস্তুটো আমি সকলোৱে বুজিব লাগে যে আমি সদায় কওঁ women are women's worst enemies, সেইটো নহয়. So we need to start with that belief. Because that's, you know, that feeling of sisterhood amongst women.
Yes.
It's that's a resolution possibly we need to take. That এইটোৰ পৰা আগৰ কথা আছিলে, এতিয়া I think women are starting to support women, and that's the belief with which we should grow. Right?
আৰু মই এইখিনিত আৰু এটা কথা কওঁ, মোৰ মায়ে সদায় কৈছিল, যোনটো আজি মেডাম দাসেও কৈছিল, যে সদায় তোমাৰ তলত চোৱা, there are so many people যোনে সেইখিনি লেভেল পোৱা নাই. So কেতিয়াও don't always dream for the stars. Try to help those people at least to come at par with you. সেইটো মোৰ মায়ে কিন্তু সদায় কৈছিল, আজি মেডাম দাসে একেটা কথা কৈছে. So we should be so happy that ভগৱানে আমাক ইমানখিনি দিছে. At the same time, আমি কিন্তু আমাৰ তলত যোনখিনি আছে, আমি তেওঁলোকক উঠাব লাগে, এনকাৰেজ কৰিব লাগে.
আৰু এটা কথা মোৰ মনলৈ আহিছে যে প্ৰায়ে সেইটো মই নিজৰ কেৰিয়াৰটো দেখিছোঁ, চবেই হয়তো নিজৰ কেৰিয়াৰ দেখিছে যে এগৰাকী মহিলা যদি এটা পজিশ্যনত আহি যায়, তেওঁ to be considered equal to a man, she should be more than a man. Right? Only then she is considered equal to a man. Most of it, that's a mindset. And then a woman actually has to prove a lot. বহুতখিনি prove কৰি থাকিব to be taken seriously. So on that, anyone would like to react? Even from the audience, we can start making it very, very interactive. Kabar jodi kiba kobo ase, any comment you would like to give? Let's try to make it very, yeah, sure. We'd like to give her the mic.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Manjari Sharma, and I have come to attend this program with my sister, Kasturi. She is sitting on the dais. And it was really very nice listening to all the speakers out here, all the panelists. Like Chandana said, every female has her own story. Even I have my own story, but I'm not going to make that or speak about that in details. But what I'd like to say, when we are talking about gender inequality, where the women are more or less suppressed, and we are now trying to empower the woman, I am very fortunate to share a good news with all of you that I am heading the Department of Nephrology, which is a super specialty department. That means I look after kidney disease patients, right? And in my college, in Guwahati Medical College, we are six super specialist doctors who are heading the department. So the head of the Department of Cardiology, means heart disease, is a female. The head of the Department of Nephrology is a female. The head of the Department of Neurology is a female. The head of the Department of Plastic Surgery is a female. And head of the Department of Hematology, who looks after blood disease, is a female. So we feel very empowered, right? And it's a very good news to share amongst all of you. And yes, like Shiparna Madam had said, when you hold the big position, when you are at the topmost position of your specialty, you need to look very tough, right? So I might look very thin and small and frail and all, but if I don't raise up my voice and let the other people hear, then I have to be, you know, I might be sometimes like consider, oh, she's a female, so she cannot, administer the department. But like me, all the other females in Guwahati Medical College, yes, we are bold enough. We are competing with the men unknowingly because we need to survive, right? And in this journey of mine, and same with all my other HODs, we are doing very good as far as the administration is concerned. So yes, like Kasturi said, we have to be supportive of each and every woman, so that all of us, we get empowered and come to such a position whereby we can say, yes, we are knowingly or unknowingly, we are equal to the other gender as well, and set example to the whole of the society. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll share something of a small joke. There's experience, but it's a very small joke. Once ever ki hoisil, I was coming from US to India. There, all of a sudden, flight, there was an announcement, attention, attention, any doctor in the flight. So like I was, okay, more doctor mo hat dangilu. So there were people in the hat dangi. So what happened? Our business class at a gentleman go he had a collapse. Bathroom collapse. Then more Dory goes, so I had seen the pulse feeble, it a patient to key. Then more monopori said, now I'm a hardcore eye doctor and that person is collapsing. So what did a person one of the okay, Jetia males will like if they want to mature it. Then a toilet jabo bisabo, there is a whole coritake, they have a vasovagal attack. Tamane ketaba hoy, when they just make mature. More habilis are vasovagal, take it or vasovagal attack. So immediately more body to uthai this, and this is the line of treatment for every vasovagal attack. Then a blood flow will not have like. In the meantime, a John male and he also happens to be a white doctor. I'm from Mayo Clinic and I'm a cardiologist. Okay. So move to Patane, so good doctor, Indian doctor, so male doctor and male goes, no, this is a cardiogenic shock. So you put the legs down. Also, no, I bhori to thadilo. So it was a struggle between him and me. Bhori tall kor, bhori upar kor. And bhori upar tall kor, and a patient to uthigol. Okay. So that was so interesting. And patient to uthigol, patient happens to be a doctor. Now, I mean, the patient was, okay, this young lady is right. Actually, I wanted to, while I was holding my toilet, and when I forcefully I had micturated, and I got an attack. So I was feeling so good. So immediately, like, the mane cruise asil, so they gave me a big present day. So gifted asil, there were wine, whiskeys, but somehow I don't drink. That is not in my system. So that was something very wonderful, and I gave it back to some of my friends and was so happy. So it's so interesting, like people think that if it is a male and from a higher education, especially abroad train, okay, so even those people in that aircraft, they're saying, "Taino soku doctor ki jane bhori upar koise teu kote correct. Jetia tolka moi diu upar kori, upar tol kori thakonte patient uthi gol." So it's so interesting. So sometimes there are small challenges in a work also, just in the day-to-day activities.
Very interesting. Anyone would like to,
Madam, yeah.
Thank you for your warm welcome, Dr. Kasturi. I am Dr. Rashmi Bagga. I am a professor of obstetrics and gynecology from Chandigarh. And I happen to be visiting my daughter, who is Dr. Kasturi's student. And today it's so nice that I'm here with you. So like I listen to all of you and to doctors, obstetrics and gynecology, midwifery, childbirth, it is one of the medium hierarchy levels in medicine. But it is so important. You mentioned in the end that empowering women with birth control will take away so many problems of them. And another very pressing problem which I face in my day-to-day practice is the problem of cervical cancer. I'm very passionate about it because cervical cancer is so much preventable. And it is preventable by just a simple test every woman can get done every 3 years, which we call as pap smear. This is caused by a virus. The person who discovered that this is caused by a virus got a Nobel Prize. This is preventable by a vaccine. So this is something which most of us don't know. So I and my friends in PGI, we have made a small PowerPoint presentation. We are going to various schools and colleges, and actually we're talking to their staff, the teachers, telling them about it so that they can pass on the information to their students and who can get the benefit of vaccine, which can start at the age of 9 years, and pap smear starting after they're sexually active, 21 onwards. And to my surprise, in my last OPD, I had a lady patient who was an educationist. She had retired from the Department of Education in Chandigarh, one of the most literate cities in the country. And she came to me and she had a minor problem, and I diagnosed her with stage 2 cervical cancer. It was a very sad day because it was very easily preventable. Anyway, she will get treatment, she will get totally cured. But then I told her, I said, don't you know you are in education? Then I sat with her, we discussed, she brought her granddaughters for the vaccine, she brought her daughters for the pap smear. So just, this is a stage where I think I can reach out to so many of you and spread the message, please, because this is a difficult examination. Every woman does not like to undergo a gynecological examination, which is required for this purpose, but it will save many lives, it will save difficult treatments, and this is all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this information. Thank you so much. Yeah. Nelly, you would like to?
Coming to that position, as you are saying, being there, and to have the male dominance and not respecting women, I feel every woman has is a respected woman. She needs to have confidence in herself, and needs to respect herself, her position, and of course, her homework needs to be done to show that, well, my knowledge skills are there. You know, if you are empowered in your knowledge skills, your communication skills, and you stand up as, yes, I know it and I can do it and I can prove it, I think that sums it for being the boss in your workplace. Right. And be confident about it.
Just adding on to what all our elite speakers have already said, another important thing which we need to emphasize when we are speaking about women empowerment is to take good personal care of ourselves. Every woman should have the right to take care of themselves, whether it is the right kind of food they take, or the right kind of exercise. You know, healthcare should be incorporated into every woman's well-being. And by this, I don't just mean that they need to go for, health checkups, but they can do their personal, as ma'am has already mentioned, breast cancer, cervical cancer are certain issues which are very unique to women. You know, you don't find a male suffering from cervical cancer or breast cancer. So women should be aware of all these issues. Serial self-examination of the breast itself can, tell us whether we are having an early stage of breast cancer. And pap smear examination, as ma'am has already mentioned, it should be incorporated into every woman's health checkup after the age of 40 years. A vaccine can prevent us from having cervical cancer, but a pap smear can help us detect early cancers. We have seen in our clinic that, some females, they come to us with very late stages of advanced breast cancer, late stages of advanced, cervical cancers. So they land up in the ICU with so many complications. But every woman should have the right to know that what are the diseases they may suffer from, and be aware of them and go for periodic checkups so as to, prevent early complications and death. In the West, we have wonderful clinics. In the West, they have clinics for breast cancer screening, cervical cancer screening, and bone mineral. Another important thing women suffer from is osteoarthritis. We have so many female patients coming to us in the clinic with joint pains, knee pains. So osteoarthritis is a disease which is unique to women, mainly because of the lack of calcium in the bodies. So bone mineral densitometry is a test which females should undergo to find whether they are prone to, diseases due to joint pains or osteoarthritis. So these are certain health issues which we need to make every woman understand, and not just us, but also carry this on to the other people. We have female workers at home. We have, people who are not aware of health issues, but if we need to educate them. Go to the schools and educate the female children. Tell them about it. It is not, nowadays it is not a taboo to talk about birth control measures. It is not a taboo to talk about sexually transmitted diseases. We need to go to the children, at the young age, girls, children, go to the schools, talk to them about these issues so that they are aware and they can protect themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Audience, do they have any questions?
I'm Shanta. I'm Director CII, and generally from our secretariat, we don't ask questions to the panelists. So I'm not going to ask anything to the panelists, but for the awareness of the audience, I just would like to say Dr. Chandana Sharma, she is a physician, well-known physician, but she is a neighbor of ours, and we have been seeing her regularly doing exercises, and she has been running the whole route every day, whether it is hot, sticky day or the rainy day. And people are so encouraged by her that in the whole, periphery, whoever had done earlier the morning walk or the evening walk, now they also started running. So one woman, if they can set an example, because generally the women don't run, they always go for walk only, because they may feel that no, it will look awkward or something like that. But once she started in, I have noticed everyone is now started running. So that's the thing that one woman can do. Looking at her now, everyone is following her. That's good.
You want to add on? Yeah.
I'll just add on to the cervical cancer, breast cancer awareness. I guess I'm audible. To the awareness, so first I would like to say, as we are in the breaking the ceiling, glass ceiling, so Scotland becomes the first country to have sanitary napkins available free in every place because of a lady Labour minister who took this topic up in 2 years back, and November 2020, now Scotland becomes the first country in the world to have sanitary napkins freely available in all the washrooms, public washrooms. And then they called the act as, they had said the notion was period poverty. So now we've got this is one country to get over period poverty and break the glass ceiling. So here in India, in my organization also, we are trying to do is reach out to every school, co-ed and girls, to at least make available sanitary napkins for the basic understanding of hygiene for women, where we consider ourselves a poor country. And when we say a poor poverty, we have major population under poverty. So when we say poverty, as T.Y. Das ma'am had said, when poverty men, 24% poorer are the women to the same men. You get what I'm trying to say? If the men is poor, the women is 24% even poorer. So she will be, for her, the basic necessities will be available even later, which is not available actually. So we are trying to use the CSR fund of various companies, including Indian Oil Corporation, to reach out to every school, co-ed and girls in the village to make available sanitary napkin vending machines. So I guess this is one way wherein, somewhere we could be even then utilizing the sources of doctors to reach out to them and also spread the information, because when a vending machine is set there, then at that point we also have doctors go and explain about the hygiene factor of using sanitary napkins. So I guess that is one time when we can also be promoting breast cancer awareness and cervical cancer awareness. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions that we have? Any comment, any question? We're almost on time. But I think one lesson which has come up very clearly from all the women leaders here, sitting here, is that there is a care amongst all to lift up people down the line, bottom of the pyramid, which is very, very important. I think that's another very important quality of a leader, that you care for others. Caring is important because leadership is not just holding a position and managing things, it's also about caring. And we need to be also aware that at the bottom of the pyramid, just because a woman is earning doesn't mean that she's empowered. Sometimes it also happens that at the bottom of the pyramid, you are doubly exploited. You're earning because, it becomes very comfortable for the family. But then you are not left, you also have a lot of other household chores that you have to do. This thing came to my mind when, during my work, I used to keep on going to Imphal, Manipur, and we all proudly say that is the Ima Bazaar, it's all women market. And we find all women sitting there selling handloom, handicrafts, etc. So then, as we were interacting, got to know that they come up from faraway villages, and if in case they are late reaching back home, where they have to catch a bus and go back home, they are often beaten up by their, husbands. So there is the other side to it. there are many a time in the name of economic empowerment, women are also exploited, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. We need to raise, consciousness about that also. We need to empower women on that too. That's also very important, and that's how we, take along all women across all, entire vertical of right from the bottom of the pyramid to middle to where we reach at the, we break the glass ceiling finally. So that empowerment is a responsibility of women leaders to take it forward. So I think if there are no more questions, we would like to wind up. We are almost bang on time, 1 o'clock was the time. Thank you so much to all the panelists. We had a wonderful session. At least I enjoyed a lot. Thank you.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists. I was enthralled throughout. It was not just engaging and inspiring, but very informative. And also we got to know that it's not just, we know, but we were made aware today that it's not just financial independence, but also healthcare is very important for women to break that glass ceiling, which we should really focus upon. In fact, I would say it was inspiring for our young generation, and I would also say that things are looking up because our young generation is much more aware than we were. Because I would like to add on, I got, there was something I wanted to add to. It's about my teenage daughter. She told me the other day that, Mom, what about getting my gynecological checkup? And I said, yeah. And immediately that crossed my mind, oh, is something wrong? She said, no, don't I need a checkup? And I felt so stupid being educated, being literate. She's telling me that, we need. So I think women by and large are becoming more aware of things. And when Indu Singh just talked about the vending machine, about, spreading the villages. Yes, when I was a journalist 10 years ago, I used to go to villages and see that the maximum dropout rate of women, of girls after class 6. I hope things change for the better. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sriparna ma'am, and to our guests today. I would request you all to please accept our small memento as a token of gratitude. Can we have the mementos, please? This will be handed over by Dipanita Jaiswal ma'am. All these women have seem the impossible possible and have changed their obstacles to challenges and challenges to, to opportunities. Yes.